let's dive in. Today we're tackling a literary giant, Ernest Hemingway.
Oh, Hemingway. Everyone thinks they know him, right?
Right, the tough guy, adventurer, the bullfighter, big game hunter.
Yeah.
We're going deeper than that.
Way deeper. We're going to unearth the man behind all those iconic images, the influences that shaped him, and that stark, powerful writing of his.
Because you might be surprised by what you find out about his life and how it all fed into his work.
It's fascinating how Hemingway's own life almost feels like one of his novels.
Oh, how so?
Just packed with drama, intensity, this relentless pursuit of authenticity. There's layers there that go way beyond the popular image.
Okay, so let's unpack those layers then. If we want to understand Hemingway, we got to go back to the beginning, right?
Yeah.
His roots. He grew up in Oak Park, Illinois.
Oak Park, not exactly a breeding ground for rugged individualism, is it?
Not quite, no.
It's funny, you picture this seemingly perfect Midwestern upbringing, but underneath it was, full of these contradictions.
Yeah. What do you mean?
His mother was strict, devout, artistic. And then you've got his dad, a doctor who's all about the outdoors, taking young Ernest hunting, fishing.
So you've got this clash right from the start, this yearning for, wildness, and then this very strict, almost suffocating upbringing. I can already see how that tension might have played into his later adventures, and of course, his writing.
Totally. Those early experiences in nature, the rawness of it all, that absolutely shaped his fascination with those classic Hemingway themes, man versus nature, life and death. And that rebellious streak, that was lit early on.
Because after high school,
Sips college.
yeah, dives headfirst into journalism at Kansas City Star.
Now this is where it gets interesting.
This is where things start to connect.
The Star had this notoriously strict style guide. Short sentences, active voice, no unnecessary words. It's almost like...
Foreshadowing. It's like a direct line to Hemingway's famously minimalist style.
Right, but then World War I breaks out and everything shifts.
Changes everything.
Hemingway volunteers as an ambulance driver on the Italian front. And this is not some romanticized vision of war.
No, he's right there in the thick of it, witnessing the brutality firsthand. He's wounded, sees horrific things that leave a permanent mark, and on top of all that, he falls head over heels for Agnes von Kurowski, a nurse who cared for him.
That experience, that mix of physical and emotional trauma, it becomes the driving force in both his life and his work. You can't separate Hemingway, the writer, from Hemingway, the wounded soldier, the man who went through love and loss against that backdrop of war.
It's a generation shattered by war, right? This feeling of disillusionment with traditional values and trying to find meaning in a world that suddenly feels, mad.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the lost generation. Hemingway and these other American artists, they flee to Europe after the war, and they're all grappling with these same feelings.
And their writing becomes this outlet for it all, this powerful expression, a farewell to arms. It's not just a wartime love story. It's the emotional, the psychological weight of war just poured out onto the page. The disillusionment, that longing for connection, just trying to make sense of it all. And
it's interesting how that experience in World War I shaped not just the themes in his writing, but the style too. That rawness, the stripped down language, the way he just cuts to the core of emotion without any of the flowery stuff. It's all right there in A Farewell to Arms.
It's unmistakable. And this is where we see his style really start to crystallize. It's not just about what he says, it's also what he doesn't say.
The famous iceberg theory.
Exactly. Think of an iceberg. You only see the tip above water, right?
Yeah. Most of it's hidden underneath.
Exactly. That's Hemingway's writing. He gives you the essential details, the surface stuff, but the real weight, the emotion, the meaning, it's all beneath, in what's left unsaid.
So he's asking the reader to do some work, to feel those unspoken emotions, to kind of piece together the hidden parts of the story.
Absolutely. It's a totally revolutionary approach to writing. By stripping away all the flowery language, all the unnecessary explanations, he creates this incredibly powerful and evocative prose that just hits you on a deeper level.
Could you give us an example of how that works in one of his novels?
Think about The Sun Also Rises. It's this group of American and British expats. They're wandering through post-war Europe, all damaged in some way, searching for meaning, connection in a world that feels empty.
It sounds pretty bleak.
It is, but it's also incredibly beautiful. He uses the iceberg theory to perfectly capture that sense of loss and disillusionment that just hangs over these characters. He doesn't tell you they're heartbroken or lost. He shows you through their actions, their dialogue, the things they don't say.
And that forces the reader to engage more deeply with the story, to really feel those emotions more acutely.
Exactly. It's like he's saying, I'm not going to spell it out for you. I trust you to feel it. And that's what makes it so effective.
It's fascinating how this minimalist style can actually convey such deep and complex emotions.
It's a paradox, right? Less is more. By getting rid of the excess, he allows those essential truths, those raw emotions, to shine through with even greater power.
And that's a big reason why his work still resonates with readers today, almost a century later. It speaks to these universal human experiences: love, loss, searching for meaning.
It transcends time and place. We all feel those things no matter who we are or where we come from. And Hemingway taps into those emotions with this directness, this honesty that's both refreshing and unsettling.
It's interesting. We've been talking a lot about the impact of war and the lost generation on his writing, but his personal life was pretty intense too, and definitely influential. 4 marriages, each one passionate and tumultuous. That's a lot of life experience to draw from.
It is, and you can really see how each of those relationships shaped his understanding of love, loss, the complexities of human connection. His first wife, Hadley Richardson, she was there during those early days in Paris when he was first finding his voice as a writer.
They were living that bohemian dream, surrounded by other artists and writers like F. Scott Fitzgerald, Gertrude Stein. Must have been a tremendously creative and exciting time.
And we get glimpses of that in A Movable Feast, Hemingway's memoir about those years. But even idyllic beginnings can end in heartbreak, and his marriage to Hadley was no exception.
And that heartbreak, that loss, it fuels his writing. You can see it in the stories and novels he wrote during and after that period.
Absolutely. And then there's Pauline Pfeiffer, his second wife. She was strong-willed, ambitious, connected to the world of journalism, a passionate, complicated relationship.
And then Martha Gellhorn, his third wife. What a force. She was a brilliant journalist herself, covering wars and conflicts all over the world. They even covered the Spanish Civil War together.
It was a tumultuous time, a meeting of minds and passions, but also a clash of egos. The Spanish Civil War had a profound impact on Hemingway, and, well, that's where For Whom the Bell Tolls comes from.
And finally, his fourth wife, Mary Welsh. She was there in his later years, providing companionship and support as his health declined. It's amazing how each of these women, these relationships, they all left their mark on his life and work.
Each one added another layer to his understanding of love, its possibilities and complexities, its potential for both joy and heartbreak. Hemingway lived life fully, passionately, and sometimes recklessly, and it all poured into his writing.
So we have this incredibly talented, complex writer, achieving international fame, revolutionizing literature. It sounds like a classic success story. But we know Hemingway's story doesn't end happily.
Right, it doesn't. The darkness that he explored so brilliantly in his writing, it was something he struggled with personally throughout his life. Those physical and emotional wounds from the war never really healed.
And the intensity that fueled his creativity, his relationships, it eventually consumed him.
He was a man of extremes, living life on his own terms. But those extremes came at a cost. The alcoholism, the depression, the impulsiveness, the demons that haunted him.
And tragically, it all ended in his suicide in 1961. Such a heartbreaking end to a brilliant life.
It is. But I think it's important to remember that while his death was tragic, his life was extraordinary. He left behind a legacy that continues to inspire and challenge readers all over the world.
Absolutely. Hemingway changed how we write, how we think about war, masculinity, the human condition itself. And people are still reading and studying his work today, millions of them. So what do you think? Was this path, this life of extremes, was it inevitable for him?
That's a question that still fascinates scholars and readers. Was it his nature, his upbringing, those early experiences that set him on this course? Or was it something else entirely? We've talked about that tough guy persona, the larger-than-life Hemingway everyone knows. But I wonder, was that just a mask, a way to protect himself from the pain and vulnerability underneath?
That's a really fascinating question, and one that I think each reader has to answer for themselves.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of Hemingway's work. It invites you to engage, to think, to feel deeply. Makes you wonder, right? Like, was the bravado, the tough exterior, was that just his way of dealing with all the emotional depth he explored in his writing?
It's possible, for sure. He was a man of contradictions, wasn't he? This hunter who had such deep respect for nature, a fighter who understood how fragile life really is, this lover who was both passionate and deeply wounded.
And all those contradictions, they make their way into his work, don't they? It's what makes his character so compelling, so real. They're not just tough guys. They're complex people wrestling with love, loss, fear, try and figure out what it all means.
You said it. And that's why people are still drawn to his writing. We see ourselves in those characters, in those struggles, those moments of triumph and failure.
We've been talking a lot about the novels, but we can't forget about the short stories.
Oh, absolutely.
They're like these perfectly formed little gems, and everyone packs up an emotional punch.
Powerful, yeah. Stories like Hills Like White Elephants, The Short Happy Life of Francis Macomber, they're masterpieces, really. Such concision, such emotional power. They distill the essence of Hemingway's style, his themes, into these incredibly potent narratives.
They're like the perfect example of the iceberg theory in action, right?
Yeah.
So much is left unsaid, but you feel it all.
Exactly. He trusts the reader to fill in those gaps, to connect the dots, to really experience those emotions, viscerally.
So if someone's like just discovering Hemingway or maybe coming back to him with fresh eyes, where would you recommend they start?
Oh, that's a good question. I always think The Sun Also Rises is a great entry point. It really captures that whole lost generation feeling and showcases his signature style so well. Honestly, you can't really go wrong with any of his major novels. A Farewell to Arms, For Whom the Bell Tolls, The Old Man and the Sea, they all offer such a unique perspective on the world.
And don't forget about those short stories.
Absolutely not.
Perfect for a quick but powerful Hemingway hit.
They'll hook you.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of Ernest Hemingway, I don't know about you, but I'm left with this sense of awe. His talent, his courage, his ability to take personal pain and transform it into something so lasting, so beautiful.
It's pretty remarkable. He was complex, flawed, no doubt, but there's no denying his legacy as a writer. He pushed the boundaries of literature, challenged conventions, left behind this body of work that continues to captivate, to inspire all over the world.
And that's worth celebrating. So
Yeah.
so go experience Hemingway for yourselves. Read the novels, the stories, his letters. Let his words transport you to another time, another place. And who knows, maybe they'll teach you something about yourself along the way.
Like Hemingway said, the world breaks everyone, and afterwards some are strong at the broken places. And it's in those broken places that we often find there's really profound truths about ourselves and about the world around us.